Have you ever imagined coming face to face with something that challenges everything you believe about the world? Today, we're diving into real accounts from people who have experienced the inexplicable, supernatural encounters that go beyond our understanding. Are you prepared to hear spine-chilling stories that make you question what lies beyond? If you're someone who believes that the unknown hides frightening truths, then this video is for you. Stay until the end to discover what happens when someone encounters the unexplainable. Could it all be real or just tricks of our minds? Buckle up and get ready to enter a world where the supernatural is closer than you might think. Since the beginning of humanity, we've had an insatiable curiosity for what lies beyond our comprehension. The idea that there's something beyond life, a place or state where we continue to exist in some way, has always been present in people's minds and hearts throughout the ages. Religions, cultures, and entire civilizations have been shaped by the belief in a dimension beyond the physical world, where what we know as reality loses its clear boundaries. And despite all our knowledge and technological advances, this question remains unanswered. So, what lies on the other side? Science tries to explain many of these experiences, labeling them as illusions, hallucinations, or simple tricks of the mind in extreme situations. But for those who have lived through these moments, scientific explanations feel insufficient. Reports of supernatural encounters come from ordinary people who never intended to experience the inexplicable, but suddenly found themselves facing something that defies reason. These moments leave deep marks, creating memories that can't be forgotten and raising more questions than answers. Here, we're not talking about stories meant to scare kids before bed. We're dealing with experiences that, according to those who lived them, are as real as the air we breathe. Maybe you're a skeptic and see all this as coincidences or products of the imagination. But what if some of these experiences really point to something more? What if, at certain times, the barrier between worlds becomes so thin that it's possible to peek, even if just for a moment, into the other side? These are the questions that drive us to listen to these stories. In this video, you'll find accounts ranging from visions of mysterious figures to contacts in dreams that seem to bring messages from loved ones who have passed away. Each story is a piece of this puzzle that brings us closer to the unknown. With each account, we dive deeper into a universe where the line between the real and the unreal becomes indistinct, and where the courage to seek answers mixes with the fear of what we might find. As we move forward, you're invited to explore these mysteries with an open mind and a genuine curiosity. You may find that there are more questions than answers, but that's the nature of the supernatural. It challenges our certainties and makes us see the world from a new perspective. And for those who've had an inexplicable experience, there's a strange comfort in knowing they're not alone in this search. Prepare yourself, for we are about to enter profound and emotional accounts where the supernatural isn't just a distant concept, but a reality that may be closer than we imagine. Imagine being at a point between life and death, where the body seems to abandon its vitality, and the mind detaches from physical reality. This is the kind of experience many describe as a near-death experience, a moment when the tangible world gives way to a different reality, where glimpses of the beyond seem to reveal themselves. The first story we'll share is about someone who, for a brief moment, claims to have crossed that invisible line, experiencing something that defies any logical explanation. It was an ordinary afternoon until an unexpected accident happened. Everything was quick and chaotic. The sound of cars, the feeling of impact, the pain that suddenly disappeared. The next thing he noticed was an absolute silence and a strange feeling of lightness. According to the account, he was floating above his own body, observing the accident scene as if he were an external spectator. The colors, the lights, everything seemed more intense yet distant at the same time. And then something changed. A presence beyond description seemed to emerge. Many describe this moment as a tunnel of light, or a passage to another dimension. In this story, he felt he was being drawn by a calm and comforting energy. It was as if fear had been ripped from him, replaced by a deep peace. He claims he saw familiar figures, people who had died years ago but at that moment seemed as alive as ever. Some were smiling, others just observing. He felt a sense of love and acceptance that transcended anything he had felt in life. This experience, brief as it was interrupted when an unknown voice echoed, saying it was not his time. The scene began to fade, and he felt he was being pulled back into his own body. As he opened his eyes, the pain returned. The sounds around him intensified, and physical reality engulfed him once more. The ambulance was there. Paramedics were trying to stabilize him, and life went on. After his recovery, he shared this experience with friends and family, but many did not believe him. Some suggested it was just a delusion induced by pain and shock, but he insists that what he lived was real, more real even than life itself. This vision of the beyond completely changed his perception of death and what might lie beyond it. Now, he carries a silent certainty that there is something on the other side waiting for us all. Near-death experiences like this are not uncommon. There are countless reports of people who, in extreme risk situations, claim to have felt this lightness, this peace, and seen something that defies logic. Some return with descriptions of intense lights, others with encounters with angelic figures, or even visions of paradisiacal places. Each of these experiences is unique, but the feeling is almost always the same. An understanding that life doesn't end here, that the beyond isn't just an abstract idea but a reality. This type of encounter makes us wonder, could what we know as death simply be a transition to another stage of existence? And what exactly are these figures and sensations? Could they be fragments of memories or something that transcends our materialist understanding? Regardless of the answers, the emotional impact these experiences leave on those who go through them is undeniable. For many, it's a watershed that transforms the way they see their own lives and the inevitable arrival of the end. And so, we begin to enter a territory where certainties fade and the inexplicable takes over. This was only the first account, a doorway to other encounters that defy reason and make us reflect on what really happens after the last breath. Prepare for even more disturbing stories, for the unknown is just beginning to reveal itself. Imagine yourself in a secluded place, far from any movement or human presence. Perhaps a dense forest, an old mansion, or an abandoned cabin in the middle of nowhere. You're alone, or so you think. Everything seems calm, but an unsettling feeling begins to grow. Something there doesn't seem right. This is the atmosphere of the next story, involving a chilling experience of someone who, on an apparently ordinary night, felt they were not as alone as they thought. It was an isolated country house, situated in a dense forest surrounded by abandoned trails few dared to explore. The owner, who rented the space to tourists seeking peace, decided to spend a night there for some maintenance. The day went by smoothly, but as the sun disappeared and darkness took over the forest, the environment began to change. Natural sounds were replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence, as if nature itself were on alert. Entering the house, he noticed a strange chill, unusual for that time of year. He adjusted the heater, but the feeling persisted. As he inspected each room, the discomfort grew. The air was heavy, as if an invisible presence were watching his every move. He tried to shake off the thought, rationalizing that it was just the isolation and intense silence playing tricks on him. But something inside him told him it wasn't just his imagination. Hours passed, and he finally decided to go to the bedroom and rest. But as he tried to fall asleep, soft sounds began to echo throughout the house. First, faint footsteps in the hallway, as if someone were walking slowly, measuring each step. Then, the sound of something scratching the wall, an irregular noise that made his heart race. He got up quickly and looked around, but found nothing. The hallway was empty, and the silence was so absolute he could hear his own rapid breathing. Back in bed, he could barely close his eyes. The feeling of being watched grew stronger by the minute, as if there were an invisible presence standing right beside him. Suddenly, he felt something cold touch his arm. a chilling touch that made him jump out of bed. Looking around, there was no one there. Trying to stay calm, he grabbed his phone and decided to light up the room with the flashlight, checking every corner. When he illuminated the mirror in the corner of the room, he saw the reflection of something that shouldn't have been there. An indistinct, dark, motionless figure seemed to be at the back of the room. It had no face, but its presence emanated an energy that caused paralyzing fear. He blinked, and the figure vanished as if it had never existed. Trembling, he decided he couldn't stay there any longer. He grabbed his things and left the house, determined never to return. As he left, he felt the presence still watching him, but now from afar, as if letting him go, but only for now. The next day, he shared the story with a few friends, but no one really believed him. Some said it was just the isolation and silence of the forest affecting his mind, and others joked that he was just tired. But he knew there was something more in that house, a presence that, even without form or face, conveyed a profound and incomprehensible fear. Since that day, he's never been able to be alone in an isolated place without feeling that same discomfort. Stories of invisible presences in desolate places are more common than we might think. Many report feeling they're being watched or accompanied when they're in remote settings. This sensation of presence goes beyond the fear of the dark or the unknown. It's a visceral experience that can't simply be explained by isolation or darkness. For some, it's proof that entities exist in the shadows, watching those who dare to enter their territory. This second story shows us how the unknown can be closer than we think, especially in places where silence is so dense it becomes almost tangible. Who or what was in that house? Could this presence be connected to the place, bound to that specific space? Or is it something that follows certain people, appearing only in moments of greatest vulnerability? The answers, if they exist, remain hidden, like the shadows inhabiting the darkest corners of the night. Prepare yourself, for our next story delves even deeper into this world of supernatural encounters, exploring an even more direct and frightening experience. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night with the feeling that something strange is in the room, a presence you can't see but can feel. For some, this is just a common fear, but for others, it's the doorway to the inexplicable. In this third account, we follow someone who experienced a disturbing encounter with a supernatural entity that, according to him, was something far beyond what our imagination can conceive. It was an ordinary early morning. He had gone to bed late after a long day at work and felt exhausted, expecting a peaceful night's rest. But around 3 in the morning, he woke up with a feeling that something was wrong. At first, he thought it was just fatigue or a bad dream, but the feeling persisted. A sudden and paralyzing chill filled the room, and he felt as though the air around him was becoming denser. Reluctantly, he opened his eyes, and at that very moment, his heart began to race. At the foot of his bed, he saw a tall, dark, motionless figure that seemed to be watching his every move. The figure didn't have a clear face, but something about the contours of that shadow conveyed an intense, threatening presence. The darkness seemed to gather around it, almost as if absorbing the faint light in the room. He tried to move, but fear left him paralyzed, unable to make any motion. The presence projected a heavy, almost oppressive energy. He felt as though he were trapped in a nightmare from which he couldn't wake, each second prolonged by a growing sense of terror. The figure began to move slowly, sliding along the side of the bed. Its movements were smooth, but carried an intention he couldn't comprehend. When it stopped beside him, he felt as though he were being examined, as if the entity were trying to understand what he was. With effort, he managed to close his eyes, trying to push the vision from his mind. But the sound of cold, deep breathing made him open his eyes again. The figure was closer now, and for a brief moment, he had the impression it was staring at him. The void where its face should have been seemed even darker, like an abyss drawing him in. He tried to speak, to scream, but no sound came out. He felt as though he were trapped, as if that entity had taken control of his very mind. And then, suddenly, the figure began to dissipate, as if being absorbed by the shadows of the room. The coldness faded, and the air became light again. The entity disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving him in absolute silence. He lay there motionless for several minutes, trying to process what he had just experienced. The fear still gripped him, but now he felt confused and disbelieving, trying to rationalize what he had seen. In the following days, he avoided talking about the experience, convinced no one would believe him. The vision of that entity haunted him, appearing in his dreams and invading his thoughts during the day. Even after a long time, he continued to feel the presence of that figure when he least expected it, as if the entity were watching, waiting for a moment to reveal itself again. He knew that encounter had left a deep mark, and that the entity was more than just a product of his mind. This type of supernatural encounter, where someone sees an entity with distinct characteristics, is particularly terrifying because it creates a concrete visual perception of the unknown. Unlike invisible presences or sensations, seeing something with a defined form completely challenges logical explanations. What was that figure? Could it be a manifestation of something spiritual, a shadow from another dimension, or, as some say, an entity that inhabits our deepest fears? Regardless of its origin, the impact of these encounters is undeniable. The sight of an entity is something rarely forgotten, remaining in one's mind as a constant reminder that the unknown exists and may be closer than we think. The experience of seeing something beyond human comprehension is both fascinating and terrifying, and those who have been through it often report that their lives were never the same again. Our next story takes us to an even more intimate and mysterious perspective, where the supernatural manifests in a surprising and enigmatic way. Get ready to continue this journey and discover that the unknown can appear in unexpected forms. After hearing these intense accounts, the question that remains is, how far does the boundary between reality and the supernatural go? Many people, like those in the stories we've just explored, claim to have experienced moments that defy everything we know. But are all these experiences real? Or could our minds be playing tricks on us, projecting fears or memories to fill the void of the unknown? Now we want to know, have you ever experienced something similar? A moment when you felt an invisible presence or saw something you couldn't explain? These experiences make us question and, in a way, connect us with a curiosity we all share. After all, what happens after the last breath? Share your stories or thoughts in the comments. Let's open this conversation to explore together the mysteries that surround life and what might lie beyond it. This is a safe space to share and hear stories. If you have a story or even a theory about what these experiences represent, don't hesitate to share. Who knows, we may discover that these encounters are more common than we imagine, or even find connections between different experiences. Stay with us, as our next story explores another fascinating and enigmatic perspective on the supernatural. Dreams are portals to our unconscious, a place where memories, desires, and even fears blend into images. But what if a dream were more than that? What if, through it, someone could receive a message from a place where life is no longer as we know it? Our next story explores this possibility, recounting the story of someone who experienced a spiritual contact through a dream, receiving a message that completely changed his perception of death. It was an ordinary night when it all began. He went to sleep as usual, but at some point in the night he felt as if someone was there with him. In the dream, he was in an open field, surrounded by a soft, calm light that seemed to envelop everything around him. In the distance, he saw a familiar figure, a loved one who had passed away years before. At first, he didn't believe what he was seeing, but as the figure approached, he was certain. It was his grandmother, someone who had always been close and whose absence left a profound void. They looked at each other, and he felt an indescribable peace, as if time had stopped. His grandmother didn't say a word, but her gaze conveyed a clear message. He knew she was okay, that she had found a place where pain and suffering no longer existed. She simply smiled and touched his shoulder, a soft, warm touch that he could still feel even after waking up. And then, the figure began to move away, gradually fading, until it merged with the light around. Upon waking up, he was in tears. That experience, brief as it was, felt more real than any dream he'd ever had. It was as if he had truly met with his grandmother and been given a chance to say goodbye one last time. He shared the experience with some family members who were moved as they all missed her deeply. Some believed it was simply his wish to see his grandmother again, but he knew there was something more. He felt that night was a gift, a visit that went beyond any logical explanation. Experiences of spiritual contact through dreams are more common than we imagine. Many report dreams so vivid and detailed that they believe they have received messages from loved ones who have passed away. For some, these encounters bring deep comfort, like proof that there's something beyond, a place where those we love continue to exist in some way. These dreams aren't just meaningless images. They carry emotions and a sense of presence that lingers even after we wake up. This type of contact raises questions about what really happens when we sleep. Could it be that our dreams are doors to other dimensions? Or are they simply manifestations of our deepest desires and longings? Regardless of the explanation, these dream encounters create a sense of connection, a confirmation that love and the bonds we create transcend life itself. Even when the body is gone, the feeling remains, finding ways to manifest. Prepare yourself, for our next chapter delves even deeper into this universe, exploring theories and explanations about the supernatural. There may be more answers than we imagine. These accounts, full of mystery and emotions, make us question what really happens when someone experiences the supernatural. Are these experiences genuine proofs that something exists beyond, or could our minds be creating these perceptions to comfort or challenge us? There are many theories attempting to explain the supernatural, from spiritual approaches to scientific viewpoints, and although each offers a unique perspective, they all contribute to the enigma surrounding these encounters. For some people, these experiences are true contacts with the spiritual world. This theory suggests that, in moments of emotional or physical vulnerability, the barrier between our world and another dimension becomes thinner, allowing beings from beyond to come closer. In this context, entities or spirits might interact with us, either to send a message, offer comfort, or simply to remind us that life continues after death. Reports of vivid dreams, like the visit from his grandmother, are often seen as evidence that the love and connection we feel with our loved ones go beyond physical existence. On the other hand, many psychologists and scientists believe these phenomena are, in fact, creations of our minds. The psychology of fear theory, for example, states that in moments of extreme stress, our minds may generate images or sensations as a way of dealing with the unknown. In situations like near-death experiences, the brain releases a series of chemicals that can cause hallucinations or the sensation of peace and comfort. In this case, these encounters would be a way for the human mind to process the anxiety and fear of the end. Another interesting viewpoint is that of quantum physics theories, which explore the possibility of parallel universes or dimensions beyond ours. Some scientists theorize that inexplicable events, such as seeing figures or feeling invisible presences, could be manifestations of intersections between dimensions. In other words, these supernatural phenomena could be brief interactions with parallel realities where beings or even versions of ourselves coexist on different levels. This theory raises more questions than answers, but offers an intriguing view of what the supernatural might mean in a scientific context. Whatever the explanation, one thing is certain: these accounts leave no one indifferent. The search for answers is natural and, for many, essential to understanding the meaning of life and death. After all, the supernatural challenges our logic and makes us reflect on the limits of what we know. Are these encounters merely illusions, or do they really offer us a glimpse of the beyond? The truth may never fully come to light, but the theories and discussions these stories inspire continue to enrich our understanding of what might be beyond the life we know. Our next story is the most intense of all, and will take us to the climax of this journey into the unknown. Get ready for one last supernatural encounter filled with suspense and emotion that will leave a lasting impression on our search for the inexplicable. For many, the supernatural is something that stays at a distance, a mystery that, though alluring, never directly touches their lives. But there are accounts that make us think otherwise, moments when the unexplainable reveals itself in an inescapable way. In this final story, we bring the experience of someone who had a supernatural encounter so intense that even today, years later, they can describe every detail with disturbing accuracy. It was late at night on a work trip when she had to stop at a roadside hotel to rest. The place seemed ordinary, an old building dimly lit with long, silent hallways. She was so tired that she hardly cared about the appearance of the place. She just wanted a bed where she could sleep for a few hours. After checking in, she went up to her room and prepared to rest. But the night that seemed to be peaceful would soon take a turn she would never forget. After a few hours of sleep, she woke abruptly with a feeling of oppression. The room seemed darker than before, as if the shadows had grown denser. Sitting up in bed and looking around, she noticed that the bathroom door, which was slightly ajar, let out a faint sound, almost inaudible, like something moving inside. She tried to brush off the fear, thinking it might just be the wind or the hotel's old plumbing. But then an intense cold filled the room, and she felt as though she was being watched. Something in that environment had changed. It was a palpable feeling, as if an invisible presence were there with her, studying her every move. Nervous, she turned her gaze to the mirror in front of the bed. To her surprise, in the reflection she could see something that shouldn't have been there. A tall, indistinct figure seemed to emerge behind her, a shadow slowly approaching. Lacking the courage to turn around, she remained staring at the mirror, paralyzed by fear. The figure drew closer and closer, as if it were part of the very darkness filling the room. When she finally gathered the strength to turn around, there was nothing there. But the relief was short-lived because when she looked back at the mirror, the figure was still there, closer than ever. The details began to become clearer. A face without expression, empty eyes, and a body that seemed to dissolve into shadows. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The air in the room was so thick that each breath felt like an effort. In a burst of panic, she grabbed her phone to light up the room, but the battery was dead. Despair began to consume her as she struggled between the urge to flee and the fear that something worse would happen if she tried to escape. Then, she felt a cold touch on her shoulder, something she describes as a lifeless touch, devoid of warmth, yet filled with a terrifying presence. Finally, she found the strength to get up and run to the door. As she opened it, she looked back one last time and saw the figure still standing in the middle of the room, watching her leave with a quiet expression of indifference. She ran down the hallway to the reception, breathless, explaining to the attendant what had happened. He watched her in silence, as if her reaction were no surprise, and simply said, "You're not the first person to go through this." Shaken, she left the hotel without looking back. The experience marked her deeply, and to this day, she says that encounter was real, something that couldn't be the product of a simple nightmare. That figure, whatever its nature, seemed to be a manifestation of pure evil, a presence somehow tied to the place and the very history of that hotel. Stories like this make us wonder about what might be hidden in places that seem ordinary. Could certain presences be bound to specific locations, repeating their torment night after night? Or could these figures be reflections of the deepest fears of those who see them? Each story, like this one, reminds us that the unknown is closer than we imagine, and that sometimes the supernatural doesn't need an explanation, but only a witness. This is the mark left by supernatural encounters, a reminder that, as much as we try to explain and understand, some mysteries will forever remain unanswered. These stories have taken us to explore a world where the unexplainable is always lurking, hidden in the shadows, and sometimes present in the most unexpected places and moments. Each experience, marked by fear, curiosity, or even love, makes us question what truly exists beyond our reality. Are these supernatural encounters simply products of the human mind? Or are they glimpses into a dimension beyond our understanding? For those who have lived through these experiences, the impact is undeniable. Each account reveals a deep mark, a memory that doesn't fade and challenges any rational explanation. These encounters remind us that there are more things between heaven and earth than our minds can conceive, and maybe that mystery is the true essence of the supernatural. And you? Do you believe in what these accounts have told us? Or do you think there's a logical explanation for everything? Regardless of the answer, the supernatural will continue to fascinate and challenge us, opening doors to questions that may never have answers. After all, it's this search for the unknown that connects us, and as much as we try to understand, the mystery is what keeps these accounts alive in our memories. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the unexplainable. Until next time, where other mysteries and stories await us, ready to challenge our perception of what is real and what might lie beyond.